Things have not been going well for Alec Baldwin. The other day, reporter John Levine was walking through New York and saw Baldwin and decided to ask him some questions, particularly that Alec Baldwin had claimed in an interview that he didn't pull the trigger. And this reporter said, "Did you really not pull the trigger?" And Alec Baldwin turns around, starts walking towards the guy at an accelerated rate. I don't want to say he charged at him. That's what some media outlets have said. But he walks up to John and he's like, "You can't take photos on private property." And then Halyna, I think it's Halyna, pushes him back. And this became a big story in and of itself, that Alec Baldwin had lashed out at a reporter when questioned on street about fatal Rust shooting. The dude seems to be breaking down. His interview and statements made by other people on set, I believe, have just further incriminated him. So we have a bit of an update across the board on what's going on here. We have the story from last week. Rust AD agrees Baldwin didn't pull trigger, but sheriff's not convinced. Baldwin may actually get criminally charged. Most people say involuntary manslaughter. And it's hard to know exactly what happened, but Baldwin's story is that he pulled the hammer back and it just went off. And this you probably have heard, but in a recent interview, he gave details where he was like, "I was pulling out the gun and I was showing Halyna, who's a cinematographer. She was telling me where to point it. She told me to pull the hammer back and then it went off." I don't believe that for a second. But interestingly, as much as we do have Washington Post and CNN bringing in experts which call into question Alec Baldwin's version of events, we have what may be one of the funniest stories I've seen written about this. It's a listicle from BuzzFeed.com. 23 eye-opening details Alec Baldwin revealed in his first interview since the Rust prop gun accident. This whole thing is a creepy defense of Alec Baldwin when, as far as I can tell, the current circumstantial evidence and statements we have so far does implicate him in at least involuntary manslaughter. But when you read BuzzFeed, they're really trying to protect this guy. Surprise, surprise. Many people have said, well, look, Alec Baldwin is a party member, so he's not going to face any real repercussions from this. Let me just break this down, and I want to show you this BuzzFeed story, because most of you probably know the story, but for those that don't, Alec Baldwin claims that he never pulled the trigger. He was filming a movie called Rust. The cinematographer got shot. Now, let me wind this all back and explain to you some context before we read what BuzzFeed is saying, which is insane. Alec Baldwin's story would have to be that he knew he wasn't supposed to be receiving the gun from somebody who was not supposed to be handling the gun. He said, "I didn't check it because if I manipulated it, they would take it away from me." But he receives the gun from the AD, someone who's not trained to be handling it, and that's okay with him. Then it would have to be that someone accidentally put live bullets in the gun, and that the single action revolvers, I believe they have a sear, I believe all firearms do. It's what holds the hammer back, would have had to have been broken. Now here's a big revelation. The Rust AD, associate director or assistant director, claimed that, yes, Alec Baldwin said he didn't pull the trigger, and he's correct, he didn't. That was a mistake. But what he actually says was that, I think he said that his finger was off the trigger and was actually never in the trigger guard. That actually is incriminating and a big mistake. If the argument was that or potentially, we'll see what happens with the investigation of the gun. But I think this actually does incriminate this statement, because the only way that gun's going to go off is if Alec Baldwin had his finger on the trigger already when he pulled the hammer back, so the hammer was just freely moving. That's the only thing that really makes sense, other than an insane series of coincidences occurred and the gun's sear had been damaged for some reason, even though people had just been using it, they said. Now, could be. There are reports that there were misfires, they say. Well, misfire is the wrong term. Negligent discharge, perhaps. It actually could be that the sear was damaged. So I'll give that one to Alec Baldwin. And that means when they pull the hammer back, there was no mechanism to stop the hammer from going forward. So while a lot of experts have come out and said the only way that would have happened is if Alec Baldwin had the trigger depressed and not realizing it, and he pulled the hammer back and it would just go off. I kind of don't believe that they're filming a movie, it's a Western, And while Alec Baldwin's holding the revolver, he has proper trigger discipline. That doesn't seem like something movies do. When movies are showing someone with a gun, their fingers are always on the trigger when they pull the hammer back. Always. Now, when in modern movies, when they have rifles, they're doing proper trigger and muzzle discipline. The gun's pointed down and their fingers off the trigger, depending on the character. But if we're talking about an old Western, he'd have his finger on the trigger. That's just Hollywood. I just think about it for 2 seconds. Imagine a Western where a guy's holding a revolver with his finger out of the trigger guard when he pulls the hammer back. I just can't see that. But I saw this article from BuzzFeed. Absolutely had to bring it up. Check this out. 23 eye-opening details Alec Baldwin revealed in his first interview since the Rust prop gun accident. We're gonna break this down and fact check BuzzFeed's strange framing. They go on to mention that on August 21st, this thing happened and Halyna Hutchins was shot. They say 1. Alec said he and Halyna were new friends and collaborated frequently during the filming of Rust. When I met her, I knew she had the spark, Alec described. I knew she had that flint to her, that she was going to get that day's work done and get the shots she wanted. This is an insane start to this article. Alec Baldwin initially said, we were friends. We were friends. But then in the interview says that he had actually just met her for the first time. So they were new friends. That's what BuzzFeed says. Think about what he just said. I knew she had that flint. She was going to get the day's work done and she got the shots she wanted. It doesn't sound collaborative. It doesn't sound like they were friends. If you actually listen to the interview, he says she was intense. Doesn't sound like someone who's at work. You don't know this person and they're intense. Let me just put it this way. You get a new job. You meet Bob for the first time and someone asks you, so are you friends with Bob? I just met him. Really? What do you think about him? He's intense. That's not a compliment. That is not saying a good thing about someone. But I love how BuzzFeed says they're new friends. Right. This framing has it seem like Alec Baldwin would never have hurt her. Look at this one. Look what they do next. This was the number 2. This was only the second film that the set armorer 24-year-old Hannah Gutierrez-Reed worked on. Hannah was also the assistant prop manager. Her attorney now says that she was stretched in an inappropriate way because she had 2 jobs she was responsible for. However, Alec says he never heard any complaints from Hannah or the prop department. I said this, last month. Why would we start this conversation assuming it was the one person trained to handle the weapon who made the mistake of loading live rounds into it and then giving it to the AD who wasn't supposed to be handing it to Alec Baldwin and then accidentally went off, even though Alec Baldwin's finger was not in the trigger guard and he was told by Halyna to aim the gun at her and pull the trigger back. Yo, this story, their version of events, gets crazier every step of the way. And that's what BuzzFeed is alluding to, essentially. It was only her second film. I mean, so what? What does that mean about her training with firearms? Now, I will point out, Halyna Hutchins, I'm sorry, I keep mixing their names. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, in this image, holding these guns, has her fingers off the trigger. So perhaps. I want to point out this, though. Look what BuzzFeed even does in the title of this, prop gun accident. It's not a prop gun. That's a manipulation. It's a live firearm with real bullets in it. They say it was a prop gun. It was an actual functioning single-action revolver. Here we go. The first time Alex said he heard about the dysfunction on set was when Lane Looper, the first camera assistant, resigned, citing dangers on set. How would Alec Baldwin not know that someone resigned? Some of the concerns Lane wrote about included misfires on set. Wrong. Misfire typically implies the round does not discharge. They're talking about negligent discharge. They quote, during the filming of gunfights on the job, things often played very fast and loose. So far, there have been 2 accidental weapons discharges, Lane said in his resignation letter. Now, to be fair, 2 accidental discharges could imply that there was damage to this firearm and particularly the sear. I can believe that. And I think that's important to point out that potentially evidence does lead to that conclusion. But then there's several questions to be asked. How did a live bullet get in the gun? Why did Alec Baldwin not check the gun? If it is his understanding that manipulating the gun would result in it being taken away from him, why would he assume that the director, the assistant director, was a firearms expert? This was at the very least involuntary manslaughter. And there's a lot of legal experts who have come up with that opinion. I think it probably could go further than that. The story is that this is what Alec Baldwin has to claim. that Hannah Gutierrez Reed made a mistake and loaded live rounds into the gun that had been damaged, and the sear mechanism wasn't working. I never pulled the trigger. In fact, the AD says his finger wasn't even in the trigger guard, but he was told he was then given the gun by someone who wasn't supposed to give it to him. He was then told by Halyna to point the gun at her, pull the hammer back, and then it just went off. But that would also mean that Alec Baldwin pulled the hammer back and released it. Now, look, I'd assume a guy who's got decades in the industry, especially with firearms, would know how to properly release a hammer without accidentally discharging it. Perhaps the gun could have blanks in it. Either way, it'd still be dangerous. You keep your after you pull the hammer back, you want to release it, you slowly lower it. If his finger wasn't on the trigger and Baldwin did not feel the latch of the sear, I'm calling BS on their whole stupid story. Assuming the sear is broken, that means that Alec Baldwin pulled the hammer back, but it did not fire. Check this out. They say, during the scene Alec was shooting with the gun, the first assistant director allegedly declared this is a cold gun on the film set. We've heard that before, and that's irrelevant. In the scene that Alec was performing when the incident happened, he was supposed to pull out the gun, point it, and cock it right as the scene cuts. He says he was never instructed to do more than that. Alex, and so this is interesting because we had previously heard that he was not supposed to have fired the gun. And so perhaps, I think it's fair to say, correction on previous, statements and videos, perhaps it did call for him to pull the gun out and pull the hammer back, but he was not supposed to fire it. Baldwin saying he didn't pull the trigger. Okay, let's go back to this. They say, Alex said when he was rehearsing the shot, Halyna was looking at the monitor and telling him which direction to point the weapon in. She's guiding me through how she wants to hold the gun for this angle. Alec claims he pulled the gun's hammer back as far as he could without cocking the actual gun, as instructed by Halyna. When he let go of the hammer, the gun went off. Incriminating statement. The single action revolver or single action revolvers have a locking mechanism, and it's within millimeters. If you're holding it, watch the video from there's several videos of weapon experts showing you gun safety. You pull it back even like 10%, it locks in place. It's a safety mechanism. You pull it back again, it clicks. You pull it back again, it clicks all the way back. If Alec Baldwin said he pulled the gun's hammer back as far as he could without cocking the actual gun, so the sear was broken, he pulls it all the way back? No. If he were to pull it back even slightly, it would go back. In fact, we've got some old Civil War weapons. I've got a Civil War antique rifle, percussion cap, and I'm assuming this wasn't a percussion cap weapon, but they're similar. And then I've got some flintlock stuff. You pull it back slightly, it locks. You try pulling the trigger, nothing happens. At least on those weapons. I'm not saying they're the same weapon. Alex said it was neither in the script for the trigger to be pulled, nor did he pull it. The AD's attorney told ABC News that he witnessed the whole thing and agrees with Alec that he did not pull the trigger and that his finger was outside the trigger guard. All right. So maybe it was a broken gun. Still the question of why was live ammunition put inside of it? This is an extraordinary sequence of events. Alex said the gun was supposed to be empty and that this accident never should have happened. I was told I was handed an empty gun. Even if there were cosmetic rounds, nothing would have charged at all, he explained. Alex said he initially thought Halyna fainted when she fell down after being shot. The notion that there was a live round in that gun did not dawn on me till probably 45 minutes to an hour later. What? Yo. When a gun goes off, you hear it. We call it eye pro and ear pro. It's eye protection and ear protection. So you go to the range and everyone will tell you eyes and ears. You can't even walk into a range unless you have both of those on. There's like you walk through. So at least out here, you'll walk in. There's a massive heavy door. You open it and there's signs everywhere saying you must have ear protection and eye protection. You walk in without it, they'll be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And they'll stop and they'll push you out. Now, if you're at an outdoor range, they might say, get back, because a lot of the sound travels forward, so depending on where you're standing. But typically, you got to wear ear protection. You do not want to be standing next to weapons when they go off. For Alec Baldwin to have no ear protection, fire a live round in the back. I didn't even realize she got shot for 45 minutes. I thought she fainted. You didn't hear the bang of the gun? Dude, I'm just going to say, when I weigh all of these facts, and it keeps getting worse for Baldwin, I will say this. I don't want to believe that he put a bullet in the gun and then intentionally shot this lady. You know, if people have pointed out with a single action revolver, there's a latch on the right side. You flick it open, you slide the bullet in, but then the cylinder has to travel around before it'll fire. I don't want to believe that Alec Baldwin did this because it sounds crazy. But just thinking about all the things he said and all the things that had to have occurred for this accident to have happened is just downright absurd. Okay, so we've added a couple more to the mix. Let's do this. The armorer accidentally puts live bullets in the gun and then leaves it unattended when the assistant director picks up the gun without checking it and declaring it cold, handing it to Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin, who knows he's not supposed to be given the gun by anyone but the specialist, the prop master, decides he won't check it even though it was manipulated by another person, is then told by the cinematographer to aim the gun at her and pull the hammer back, firing the gun and killing her because the sear had been damaged. His finger was off the trigger guard. There was no depressing of the trigger. It just fired because the locking mechanism was busted. And then Alec Baldwin, not realizing there was a gunshot and a bang, thinks she just fainted and doesn't say anything or doesn't realize anything for 45 minutes to an hour later. Alec Baldwin keeps incriminating himself. Or I should say, this is incriminating. Let me just stress that last point again. After all of the insanity of the circumstances that led up to Alec Baldwin having shot this woman, he went on to claim the notion that there was a live round did not dawn on me till probably 45 minutes to an hour later. He was holding the gun. He pulls the hammer back. By his own story, there was no lock. There was no cock. He releases it. It fires in his hand. That didn't startle him. The bullet went straight into her chest. Right through her spine. It was like a perfect shot right at her chest. And Alec Baldwin didn't realize the gun went bang and there was recoil for 45 minutes to an hour later. The notion there was a live... So what? She drops to the ground. Think about this for 2 seconds. She was my friend. BuzzFeed says they were new friends. The lady who was just standing feet in front of you collapses to the ground after the gun goes off and you walk away. Is that his claim? He didn't stop and say, oh, she fainted. Is she all right? Almost immediately after she fainted, she was there in distress, unable to move. People were pointing that out. And Alec Baldwin didn't realize this for 45 minutes? Sounds to me like he pulled the hammer back, the gun fired, hit her, and then he walked away. Now, why would he do that? Why would Alec Baldwin just walk away after a gun went off in his hands and a woman collapsed? Because he knew? Because he knew that was going to happen? He wasn't friends with her? He didn't care about her? Let's operate from the assumption that they were friends. They were friends. And as BuzzFeed put it, they were new friends. If you're holding a gun and you pull the hammer back and there's a bang in your hand and the person in front of you collapses, would you just walk away? How would you not know they were shot for 45 minutes? Alec Baldwin may be misunderstanding. Maybe, he had no sense of time. But wouldn't you immediately then be like, whoa, are you okay? Even if she just fainted. Let's assume everything Alec Baldwin said was true. Alec Baldwin's standing there, the gun goes off, and she faints. Wouldn't within a second, he'd be like, Halyna, are you okay? Halyna, did you faint? What's happening? Wouldn't he be like, can I get some help? Medic. 45 minutes. So what does that mean? Does that mean he walked away and then someone was like, Alec, she was shot. And he went, oh, my stars and garters. I didn't realize. I mean, the gun went off in my hand. They told me it was cold, but I didn't even think for 45 minutes. Dude, I am sick of everyone making every assumption and to lead this down the path that Alec Baldwin didn't do anything wrong. And I will shout out those analysts, Andrew Branca and Viva Fry, for talking about this and saying involuntary manslaughter. But guys, let me ask you this. That question right there, doesn't that escalate it? I mean, maybe it doesn't. But the idea that the gun went off in his hand and then he did not even realize he fired a live round into the chest of one for 45 minutes, isn't that kind of an insane statement? Shouldn't an investigator or prosecutor say, how is it that your new friend was hit by a round? In fact, they have the gun. Check the sear. Check to see if the hammer locks back. I think there's real criminal charges here. Because he's put out statements that are incriminating. His finger wasn't on the trigger guard. Well, if the gun works, if the sear locks the hammer in place, this guy lied. That right there is the most incriminating thing I've seen so far, because I don't know how you walk past that one. He shoots a woman and then doesn't realize it for 45 minutes. The same bullet went through her. They say allegedly no one told Alec what had happened until he was at the police station hours later. It was like seeing aliens. It was utter disbelief over the idea. It was unacceptable, the idea that it was a live round. Bro, she was standing in front of you. She was standing in front of you and you shot her. And you were like, I didn't even know until I was at the police station. What? So what do you think happened? She fainted and was unconscious? Did you not stop and check? So perhaps it's fair to say Baldwin fired the round and she dropped and he thought she fainted and he did stay and help and say, are you okay? How would they not know that she was shot? She would have a bullet hole, an entry wound right there in her chest that you'd be able to see and you would need to tend to. So unless Alec Baldwin did not actually watch anything happening, maybe. I love how BuzzFeed does this. According to Alec, the police eventually informed him it was a 0.45 caliber bullet was pulled from Joel's arm, a real bullet. Okay, you don't need to put the zero in front of it. It's a 45 caliber bullet. We get it. You could probably just write 45. Alec claims he had no idea that Halyna's injuries could be fatal. At the end of his interview with the sheriff's department, they reportedly informed him she had passed away. Alec said he was embraced by Halyna's husband, Matthew, when he came to town. He was as kind as you could be. Alec said he is most confused about why and how the gun was loaded. I don't know how that bullet arrived in that gun, but I'm all for doing anything that will take us to a place where this is less likely to happen again. Okay, some people are saying sabotage. Maybe, but look, I look at all of this and Alec Baldwin's behavior after the fact. I don't believe that sabotage is the more likely outcome. I believe sabotage is possible, but if I'm looking at probabilities, I'm like 28% Alec Baldwin did it. And, 21% chance that someone sabotaged the gun's sear and put a live round in it so that when he pulled the hammer back. But, the issue there is how many times was he supposed to be doing this? Alec Baldwin said he kept doing it over and over and over again. She was saying, show me, show me, show me. All right, let's think about this for 2 seconds. Many people have pointed out to me that with a single action revolver, when you open the latch and put the bullet in, when you open the latch on a single action, you see one chamber. You put a bullet in, and then you have to manually rotate the cylinder clockwise, loading round after round. If you only put one bullet in and you pull the trigger, you pull the hammer back and pull the trigger, it'll click, hitting nothing or hitting a dummy round. It will have to go around until finally it hits, right? Until finally the live bullet is hit. That means if Alec Baldwin was the one who put the bullet in and then did not rotate the chamber, but kept pulling the hammer back when every time she said, show me, you'd pull the gun out and pull the hammer back and let it go. Pull the gun out, pull the hammer back, let it go. Pull the gun out, pull the hammer back, each time rotating the cylinder until finally the round he put in reaches that mark, hits her, and then Alec Baldwin walks away. I'm not saying that's definitive. I'm not saying I know for sure. I'm just saying, it's possible. George Clooney says he's always checked these weapons himself. Now, the issue is, it is interesting with a single action revolver. He would have to open it up and take out every round. And I don't think Alec Baldwin would be able to tell the difference between a cosmetic round, a squib, or a live bullet anyway. They say Alec said he's not very worried about being charged with a criminal offense. I've been told by people in the know that it's highly unlikely that it would be charged with anything criminally. That to me is insane. The armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, said she filled the gun with dummy rounds and does not know where the real bullet came from. Her attorney suggested that someone may have mixed live rounds in a box of dummies in an act of sabotage. Alec admitted he often has vivid nightmares about the incident. I have one question for all of this, right? And I understand, like him getting in the face of John Levine, it's a tense moment. But this, not knowing he put a 45 through the chest of a woman that severed her spinal cord, that to me sounds like utter bullcrap. Someone is standing in front of you. You point a gun at him. You pull the hammer back. And it just goes off. They collapse to the ground. People are panicking. Reports are that she couldn't move. She was paralyzed. And Alec Baldwin, walked away? She fainted. She fainted? She can't move, bro. Are you there helping her? Are you standing nearby? Are you asking what's going on? What happened? That to me is very strange. He didn't realize until he's at the police station? Why? Did he not accompany his friend to the hospital? Did he not ask everyone what happened? Everyone else seems to know she was shot but him. So he's either lying. Well, he's lying either way. I mean, he's lying about not knowing she got shot, or he's lying about them being friends at the very least. And then when you talk about he was describing her as an intense woman, I think there was motive. But it's also possible the gun was bad and someone did put, sabotage it or whatever. Maybe it was the AD. Maybe the AD handed it to him and put a bullet in it, knowing what was going to happen. But I really doubt somebody manipulated this weapon in this way. I mean, look, let me be reasonable. Final thought on this. It's possible that sabotage happened. I mean, we've got to believe, it's crazy to believe Alec Baldwin was like, I'm going to kill this lady. But we know he's got a temper. But it is still crazy to believe it. But what's crazier, honestly, I don't know. I don't. But based on everything I've heard so far, I lean at the very least towards Alec Baldwin did this. How did the live bullet get in the gun? How did, the claims he's made, I think it just makes me believe slightly more that he may have, that he did intentionally do this. Arguments with the crew on set, his description of the woman, she's my friend. Well, actually, I just met her. She was an intense woman who got what she wanted. I'm showing her. Sounds to me like a frustrated man who knew what was going on. But is it really worth it? To kill this woman over being frustrated and angry? It doesn't make sense. I mean, it can. It's just, it seems like a long shot. But then you look over all the other details, and I got to be honest, it's just way more of a long shot. I don't know if we'll find anything out. I don't know if he'll be charged, but the sheriff says, he doesn't believe him that his finger was off the trigger. So we'll see. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.